Bonjour tout le monde.
Vous allez bien? De gérer avec les libéraux. Est-ce que c'est de l'ingérence étrangère, d'après vous?
Écoutez, j'ai pas vu ces commentaires. Vous savez, il y a beaucoup de commentaires qui viennent de la Maison-Blanche. Ceux sur lesquels je me focalise, c'est surtout au niveau des tarifs. Protéger le Canada, notre industrie, nos travailleurs. Donc, j'ai pas vu ce commentaire-là ce matin.
Vous voyez ça comme une insulte, le fait qu'ils disent que ce soit plus facile de dealer, entre guillemets, avec les libéraux qu'avec les conservateurs?
Vous savez, le président américain est connu pour avoir des opinions sur plusieurs sujets. Alors, moi, je dis toujours, on prend au sérieux ce que le président dit, mais comme je vous dis...
C'est une faiblesse de votre part?
Je vous dirais au contraire. Moi, j'ai été à Washington plusieurs fois. On y retourne. On avait une réunion du G7 des ministres des Finances lundi. Donc, ils ont entendu la voix du Canada au effort. Il y a un alignement des différents ministres du G7, vraiment, sur ces questions-là, qui se préoccupent des tarifs. Vous savez, ça va nuire à l'économie mondiale. On a vu les marchés ont déjà répondu, les industries ont répondu, les travailleurs. Donc, on va continuer de se battre. Vous savez, l'idée derrière ça, c'est pour moi, c'est le grand réveil, diversifier l'économie canadienne, avoir une économie à travers le pays et en même temps faire de grandes choses. C'est ça que vous allez voir. Really? I don't know. I've seen him for 10 years. They don't look very tough to me. I would say what we need now is seasoned, serious people at the helm of this country. And I think that's what Prime Minister Carney is bringing to that. You know, the American colleagues will respect people with experience, with expertise, and people who are serious. And I think that's what we've shown the Prime Minister going in France and in the UK. The G7 meeting we had, both the Foreign Minister and Finance Minister, I think that's the kind of leadership Canadians want to see.
Quand M. Trump s'attaque à Pierre Poilievre, est-ce que ça vient briser votre spin de dire que c'est comme un mini-Trump?
Listen, écoutez, moi, je me focalise sur vraiment les enjeux qui comptent pour les Canadiens. Ce qui compte vraiment, ce que les gens sont inquiets aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment la question des tarifs. Donc, toute l'énergie qu'on a, c'est vraiment dédié à protéger nos industries, nos travailleurs, l'économie canadienne. Et puis vraiment, Benoît, on a aussi un rôle comme président du G7. Vous savez, on a un rôle très important. Les autres pays du monde nous regardent pour justement porter le flambeau des économies du G7 pour porter notre voix près de la Maison-Blanche.
Est-ce qu'il vient aider, M. Poilievre, en disant ça, vous pensez?
Écoutez, moi, je pense pas qu'on n'a pas besoin d'aide. Les Canadiens et les Canadiennes savent faire la part des choses. Ils savent que quand il y a de la turbulence, on s'attache et on fait confiance aux pilotes. Moi, c'est ce que je sens des Canadiens.
Mr. Champagne, there are reports that Canadians were executed in China, and the Chinese embassy in Canada has said that Canada needs to respect China's sovereignty on these issues and judiciary responsibilities.
I have not seen that news report, but it's concerning. I've just not seen the news report. I just have not seen it.
I mean, given how unpredictable Donald Trump is, do you think it matters whether Pierre Poilievre or your guy is in there? Does it really matter?
Well, I don't think Pierre Poilievre matters. I mean, I would say in time of national crisis, Canadians want to see steady leadership. They want to see serious people at the helm. They want to see people with a vision, with a plan. They want us to focus on the economy, protecting their jobs, having ambition for the country, building one Canadian economy. That's what I do every day, and trust me, that's what the Prime Minister has been tasking us to do. That's what we're focusing on.
Est-ce qu'il n'est pas temps pour M. Carney de dévoiler ses avoirs? Ça rassurerait les Canadiens.
Je pense qu'il a répondu à cette question-là. Là, vous étiez, je pense au Nunavut, j'ai vu ça, mais je pense qu'il a répondu déjà à cette question.
Further indication about what the April 2nd tariff plan from the U.S. looks like in terms of Canada?
Well, the meeting we had with Premier Ford was good in that sense, in the sense that we understand what the Commerce Department intends to do on April 2nd. So we have a far better understanding. That was one of the key outcomes of that meeting.
But in terms of, all the different numbers that have been floated
well, we'll
out
see
there,
that.
Were you given a clear indication about, in Canada's case, reciprocal tariffs looks like 100, 200, 400%, or what?
Like I said, the meeting we had was good to understand the plan, understanding the way they're approaching reciprocal tariff. We had a very important G7 finance minister on Monday, which I presided, where we were with Secretary Bessent, so we could bring the voice of the other economies to that. We have a very important role. Our colleagues around the world looking to Canada for leadership. That's what we're providing. I just spoke with my European colleague this morning. I was speaking to the president of the IMF. The OECD, that's what Canada can bring.
What's the purpose of those calls?
Well, it's really to reflect on the discussion we had with Secretary Bessent as the G7, and also to make sure that everyone understands that, what we need to do is to make sure that we work alongside each other the challenge we have in the world economy today is overcapacity from China, and really to act as one, but at the same time, it's somewhat difficult to achieve that when at the same time our closest partner is imposing tariffs on Canada.
Are you ready for an election campaign?
Minister, Donald Trump said last night that he'd prefer a liberal to win the next election. Are you happy to have Donald Trump rooting for you guys? What do you think of that?
I could care less what Donald Trump wants or thinks in the context of Canadian politics. I think Canadians, at the point at which there's an election, are going to have a choice about Prime Minister, and the choice will be between somebody who actually managed Canada through the last recession and Britain through Brexit, and somebody who's never actually spent a day working in the private sector in his life.
Poilievre was crowing now. Poilievre was crowing that Donald Trump wants Carney because Carney's weak. Carney will fold in negotiations.
Well, you know what? If that's the biggest victory that Mr. Poilievre thinks that he can get, fair enough. But I look forward to the campaign.
Are you campaign ready?
I am fully ready.
Mr. Wilkinson, on the Ring of Fire announcement today from the Conservatives, just wondering your impressions.
You mean the Poilievre statement?
Yes,
sir. Well, I would say, you know, Mr. Poilievre is hearkening back to a period when he was a cabinet minister under Prime Minister Harper, when nothing could get built in this country because they ignored Indigenous concerns and they actually did not be thoughtful about environmental considerations. When they ripped the heart out of the environmental assessment process, they didn't get anything built. And if you look at this government's record, there are 3 large-scale LNG facilities under construction right now in British Columbia. Trans Mountain Pipeline got built. Many mines are under construction. So I would just say, look at the track record. At the end of the day, the Ring of Fire is an interesting deposit, one harder than many other mines, including the Crawford mine, which is in Ontario. But you have to actually be thoughtful about engaging Indigenous people, and there is an assessment process underway now.
Minister MacKinnon, what do you make about Trump's comments saying that he'd like to work with a liberal?
I think he says a lot of different things.
Are you ready
Mr.
for a
MacKinnon,
campaign?
does this feel like the last cabinet meeting before the dissolution?
It's up to the Prime Minister.
I don't have you on the list.
Bonjour, Madame Bendayan. Qu'est-ce que vous pensez des commentaires de M. Trump qui dit que c'est plus facile de dealer avec les libéraux qu'avec les conservateurs, laissant sous-entendre que vous êtes peut-être plus faible que les conservateurs de Pierre Poilievre?
Ben, écoute, je pense que M. Trump parle pour lui-même. Moi-même, je suis préoccupée par tout ce qui est Canada-U.S. C'est ma première rencontre du comité aujourd'hui. Aussi aujourd'hui, Statistique Canada a révélé les chiffres en matière d'immigration et de population.
Mais est-ce que c'est une insulte à l'égard des libéraux? Est-ce que c'est une insulte à l'égard des libéraux? Est-ce que c'est une insulte?
Just in English on Trump's comments that he would prefer a liberal to win the election. Do you agree?
I think that President Trump speaks for himself, and I'm not going to comment on his comments. I was just indicating how excited and how much I'm looking forward to my first Canada-U.S. Cabinet Committee, where we'll be discussing Canada strategy, and that's what I'm for.
Okay, so I'm happy to see all of you. We had a good meeting. Of course, we talked about continuing to lifting tariffs that are unjustifiably imposed by the U.S. on us, and we're also working on preventing future tariffs. And of course, we'll continue to fight back. So I'm willing to answer your questions. Wait just a second. Ashley, I know you're impatient. Je vais juste parler en français. Donc, on a eu une bonne rencontre du comité Canada-États-Unis avec le premier ministre, et dans ce contexte-là, on a parlé comment on peut continuer à lever les tarifs, les droits de douane qui sont contre nous de façon injustifiée, et en même temps, comment on peut faire en sorte d'éviter d'avoir d'autres droits de douane contre nous. Et entre-temps, on va continuer de se battre et de se tenir solidaires. Alors oui, ça me fait plaisir de répondre à vos questions.
The executions in China.
What information can you share about the execution of Canadians in China, as well as, I know if you can't share specific numbers, but broadly, how many Canadians are we talking about?
So we strongly condemn the execution that did happen against Canadians in China. This is an issue that I've been following very, very closely personally for months, and I've asked personally also leniency, and also the former Prime Minister did so, and we made sure to press on China how much we needed to make sure that ultimately these Canadians would be safe. Therefore, we've been in contact with their families. I was even in contact last week with the team in China, and in Ottawa that was supporting the families through these difficult moments. We will continue to engage with China as we'll continue to not only strongly condemn, but also ask for leniency for other Canadians that are facing similar situations.
Why won't the government say?
How many Canadians?
So I can't go into the details.
Why not?
Why? Because the families have asked us not to give any details. And they want us to make sure ultimately that we are protecting their privacy.
But even as far as how many Canadians itself, like, how does that relate to a privacy issue for families?
So there are 4 Canadians that have been executed. And therefore, we're strongly condemn what happened. And of course, our hearts and minds are with the families.
Were they dual citizens? Were they Canadian citizens only? And can you tell us anything about their charges?
They were all dual citizens, and all of them, and that's the only information that I will give.
Can you talk about what they were accused of, or even the nature of what they were accused of?
They were all facing charges linked to criminal activities, according to China, linked to drugs.
On Ukraine, with the U.S. Deleting the database of missing children in Ukraine, what does that mean for Canada?
Sorry, can you?
Sorry, yeah, on the U.S. deleting the database of missing children in Ukraine, I'm wondering what that does for Canada, what that means for Canada.
So this is news to me. I was not informed of that, but what I can tell you though is, first and foremost, when it comes to missing Ukrainian children, this is an initiative that is core to Canada's diplomacy, that is also very close to my heart, that I've been working a lot with Ukrainians themselves. And as part of the ceasefire discussions, it's been clear that the return of Ukrainian children and also deported civilians and prisoners of war was on the table. This was a condition on the part of the Ukrainians, and this was a condition that was accepted also by the U.S.
Was there a timeline? When did you learn of this, and when were they executed?
So what I can tell you, though, is that we've been in contact through our team in China of diplomats and also in Ottawa as we were supporting the families.
Donald Trump has said that he would rather deal with a liberal government instead of a conservative government, and Mr. Poilievre said that shows that Canadians should pick him as the best option to take on Trump in this period of trade tensions. What do you make of his argument?
I think that, what Canadians want is an adult in the room to be able to take decisions when it comes to the Trump administration and dealing with the Trump administration. And that adult in the room is Prime Minister Mark Carney, supported, of course, by his team.
From Canada's perspective, is there any evidence that those that were executed were actually guilty of any drug-related offenses?
So my point is we deal with consular issues around the world. And around the world, every day, Canadians are in tough situations, and we support them, maybe in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. And every time they're facing death penalty, we ask for leniency. This is the approach we take on every single case, every single time. And because for me, the lives and safety of Canadians is so key, I got involved personally to try to prevent these executions. It's happened in the past, and Canada is not targeted. There are many other countries that are of dual nationals that are also involved, but we strongly condemn what China did because, unfortunately, we think that this is not the way to go, and this is not what we believe in.
On the meeting today, I'm just curious whether it felt or had the vibe of a meeting, of a last meeting before the dissolution of Parliament.
I think you're trying to put words in my mouth right now, and I won't answer that question.
Has this happened before? You said this has happened before.
Do you have any other subjects? I think I've answered the question. Yes.
A little bit more though about how those conversations are going with your counterparts for leniency. I mean, is there a chance that it's going to work? Like, what is your sense on that, or should Canadians expect more?
When it comes to leniency, usually what we do is we have many different people within our system, maybe the Prime Minister, maybe the President of the House of Commons, sometimes even the Chief Justice. We get involved because this is a matter of state. This is not a matter only of a political party or of the government. And so that happens in many, many, many cases. And that's what we've been doing. Being the foreign minister for 4 years now, I've done that many times with many of the different people involved.
Répétez en français vos commentaires sur la Chine, s'il vous plaît.
Oui. Bien entendu, nous condamnons de façon extrêmement ferme l'exécution de Canadiens. Il s'agit de 4 Canadiens qui faisaient face à des accusations criminelles en Chine. À plusieurs reprises, j'ai demandé la clémence de la part du gouvernement chinois pour que justement ces Canadiens-là soient protégés. Ce sont des Canadiens qui faisaient tous face à la justice en Chine liés à des cas de drogue, liés au trafic de drogue. Ce que je peux également mentionner, c'est que le Canada a été très, très impliqué au cours des dernières semaines, des derniers mois, pour mettre de la pression sur la Chine pour justement qu'il y ait de clémence. J'ai eu l'occasion de parler à l'équipe en Chine et aussi qui travaille à Ottawa, qui a soutenu les familles. Pour moi, c'était important de parler à nos diplomates pour démontrer à quel point c'était une affaire non seulement d'État, mais c'était une question de démontrer que c'était essentiellement une question d'empathie et que c'était important de soutenir les familles. Les familles ne veulent pas que l'identité des personnes soit révélée. Elles demandent à ce que leur vie privée soit respectée.
How many other Canadians are you trying to help that are
Mr. Wilkinson, can I ask you, China is set to impose retaliatory tariffs tomorrow on Canada's canola. How concerned are you for that sector?
Well, I am concerned. I grew up in Saskatchewan. I used to work for a premier in Saskatchewan, so I know how important it is to the prairie economy. It's something that we obviously need to work with Saskatchewan and with the farming community to help us diversify our trading relationships and to ideally work to see how we can actually get the tariffs taken off.
Do you think the tariffs are coming in for sure tomorrow?
I wouldn't put myself in the position of deciding what the government of China is going to do. So,
what's your government going to do to protect the canola industry?
It's certainly a live conversation, and I know Minister Blois is very seized with it at the present time.
So, executed in China. Anything you can share?
I think that's probably a better question asked of Minister Joly, who will be coming out in the next couple of minutes.
What kind of federal election campaign should we be expecting?
Well, if there is a federal election, I think you can expect all of the parties to be actually talking about economic issues. I think the primary issue that Canadians are most concerned about, not surprisingly, is who is best placed to deal with President Trump. And in that regard, I would make the observation that a leader that actually has dealt with the 2008 financial crisis, that dealt with Brexit as the governor of the Bank of England, who has been in the business community for many, many years, is probably better suited to do that than somebody who has an undergraduate degree and has sat in the House of Commons ever since.
Did the Prime Minister say the last one before Parliament's dissolved?
Pardon me?
Did this meeting feel like the last one before Parliament's dissolved?
This was a very dynamic meeting. It always is. And I would tell you that Prime Minister Carney is a very dynamic leader. But I don't know if it's the last one, but it was certainly a good meeting.
Mr. Trump suggested that he prefer to deal with the Liberals. What do you think of that comment?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm not sure I pay much attention to what President Trump thinks about those kinds of things. I think the question that is on Canadians' mind is who is best placed to deal with somebody who is as unpredictable as President Trump. And in that regard, I think I just said that the person who actually guided Canada through the 2008 recession has spent many years as a successful person in the business community, is much better placed than somebody who's never worked in the business community for one day in his life. So,
but Mr. Poilievre said today that Trump's comments mean that he's the one who's better placed.
Well, if Mr. Poilievre is taking his cues from President Trump, I think that probably tells Canadians something. At the end of the day, Canadians are going to have a choice, and their choice is between somebody who has enormous business experience, somebody who has actually been a senior executive in many different roles, and somebody who has never held a job in the private sector ever in his life.
The Prime Minister says there's a limit to how much Canada can respond to Trump's tariffs. What is that limit?
Well, that's a conversation that we are having as we go through the consultations on the list, beyond the initial $30 billion, to try to ensure that the things that we select are those that are actually going to create the most amount of pressure within the United States for President Trump to rethink. So I'm not going to speculate at what the final number is going to be, but certainly we are going to be looking to, assuming tariffs come in on April the 2nd, and let's not prejudge the outcomes there, that we will be looking to exert as much pressure as we possibly can.
So does that mean Canada cannot go dollar for dollar?
I wouldn't make that determination yet, but we do have to, be thoughtful about how we go about it. It's about creating maximum pressure. The Canadian economy is significantly smaller than the American economy, so we just have to reflect on that as well. But at the end of the day, we are going to stand up for Canada. Thank you.
Defending Canadian interests, but it's true that when the size of the economy are different, there is a limit to, the impact that you can have in putting countermeasures. But we've been very clear from day one that we will defend our nation, we'll defend our workers and our industry, and that's what the Prime Minister was expressing, and that's already what we've done. We already have a number of counter tariffs in place, and we see the impact. I would say it's the market have spoken in the United States. The industry has spoken and workers have spoken. So our job is to fight for Canadians. That's what we're going to do. We had a G7 finance minister just on Monday. We'll have a federal, provincial, territorial finance minister meeting on Friday. I would say there's unity of purpose in the sense that we are united in defending Canada, in speaking up with one voice, and that's the message that also as the president of the G7 ministers that I'm conveying to Washington.
Does the Prime Minister's words mean then that Canada cannot go dollar for dollar when it comes to responding to
No, we always said we would be dollar for dollar, but what the Prime Minister was explaining, which is very rational, is that when the size of the economy between Canada and United, you have to take the relative size of the economy into consideration when you apply these counter tariff in order to send a very strong message, but at the same time protecting the Canadian economy. So I think Canadians understand that yes, we will be there, we will respond firmly as we have done. And we have already seen the impact of that response. And I can tell you, when you're looking at reciprocal tariffs that are coming in place on April 2nd, which are likely to affect, all nations of the world, we're going to be in a very different place. So I think countermeasures that are going to be put here and in different countries, we've seen European Union and other countries which have reacted. I think hopefully that's going to lead some people in Washington to rethink that. There's a better way to do. We need to invest to be more competitive, to protect our national security and our economic security, and that's really the message we were conveying to our American friends.
Do you know if the Prime Minister has anything else to speak to President Trump yet, or do you think that's something he should do?
I think he said, we want to engage with the Americans on the basis of mutual respect. They need to understand that Canada is a strategic partner, I would say, to the United States when it comes to economic security, national security, energy security. And he said he would be prepared to speak to him, shortly. And I think that's the right thing. So we will see how the next days unfold. But Canada is a strong country. Canada is a G7 country. And we're going to diversify our economy. We're going to have one Canadian economy. That's going to be also part of the discussion with the finance ministers. And we're also going to invest. We're going to do big things in this country. We'll invest in our infrastructure. We'll invest in our industry. For me, I said, it's kind of this wake-up call that you're saying that, this is going to transform Canada. We'll have turbulence on the short time, but over the long term, we will be stronger. We will be a more resilient country, and I think collectively we'll be more ambitious, and I've never seen a country as united as today.
And looking at the future, should Canadians select an elections call this weekend?
Hey, listen, I don't have a crystal ball, but having a strong mandate from Canadians to defend their interests is what we're going to be seeking. And I think Canadians, that's what they want. They see what we're going through. If there's an element of turbulence, you want to trust people who are serious, and I think Prime Minister Kody embodies seriousness, experience, expertise. This team is the one which has been at the helm of these negotiations, defending Canada, defending our country. And I can tell you that's what people want. They don't want slogans. They don't want personal attacks. They don't want negativity. This is a time for us to rise above politics and fight for our country And that's what we're going to demonstrate to Canadians.
Are you ready for a campaign?
I'm always ready. I'm board ready. I come from Shawinigan. See you.
Mr. Blois, can I talk to you for a second about canola? So tariffs are supposed to come in tomorrow. What are you going to do to protect the canola industry?
Look, my first call when I became the Minister of Agriculture was to Minister Harrison in Saskatchewan, both on the substantive piece but also symbolically, because the Minister of Agriculture has to be a champion across the country, but particularly in Western Canada as well. We're acutely aware of this. I had a good conversation with Minister LeBlanc. Can't share all the details of where we're going, but we are focused on making sure there are supports to make sure that we have mechanisms in place to support those impacted producers. And it's not just canola. It is canola, it is peas, and under the canola branch it is meal and oil, and also pork and seafood. So this is a broader scope. This is significant. Obviously, we don't agree with the decision in terms of where China is moving in terms of its anti-discrimination case, but we'll be there to help support Canadian producers.
How are you going to support those producers? With what?
There'll be more details to follow. I'm not at liberty to be able to share that right now. Those are some of the discussions that we've had internal, and again, those conversations have been happening with my provincial and territorial colleagues. We're aligned on making sure that there's mechanisms to support in the days ahead.
Will the support be immediate?
What kind of federal election should Canadians expect once the writ is eventually dropped?
A spirited contest about who is best to basically govern the country. We're in a very uncertain time right now for Canada. I believe fully in the leadership of our Prime Minister. I believe in the leadership of the team that we're bringing here to Ottawa. We had a very important conversation about how best to move forward. So I think it'll be an election that is actually very consequential because of the moment that the country's in.
Mr. Poilievre suggested that he's tough and is the one that can take on Donald Trump. What do you think?
We just came out of a very productive conversation about what we can do to support the Canadian economy, to make sure that we're there for the farmers that this journalist just asked me about, that we're there for workers. That's our focus. With all due respect to Mr. Trump, he can have his opinions on who he thinks is best. We'll let Canadians make that choice.
Specifically, what will you be doing to help Canadian workers then?
Again, not at liberty, not my portfolio. I'm the Minister of Agriculture, but what I'm saying is that we had a very productive conversation. I've been in contact with my provincial and territorial counterparts. We will be there. We are looking at all authorities, and this is one thing I want to really highlight. When I sat down with my Deputy Minister on Friday, I said we have to look at the entire suite of tools that we have internally in our department, that we can stretch programs, that we can make sure that we're there and that we're flexible. Maybe you've already seen the work we've done with the CFIA on regulatory red tape reduction, because it really fits the Prime Minister's narrative as well, that we have to be masters in our own home. We have to be able to control what we do in this country. We, of course, are going to play in externally to what's happening around the world, particularly on the geopolitics, but we have to take care of business at home.
Have you spoken with counterparts in China about these tariffs?
The diplomatic channels continue, and we're going to continue to stay engaged on both sides, so I got to continue. Thanks.